In the beginning, there was emptiness, nothing, a void. God spoke into the darkness and created light, sky, sea, land, vegetation, and animals. This took 6 days, and at the end of each day, God paused to look at his creation and stated it was good.
On the 6th day, God created a man and called him Adam. So that Adam would not be alone, God created Eve. Adam and Eve lived in a beautiful garden called Eden. Everything they needed was provided. They had no worries or fears, and God was their friend.
In the garden, there were many trees, and God told them they could eat fruit from any tree, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
One day, Eve meets Satan, disguised as a snake. The snake is cunning and persuades her to try the fruit that God had forbidden. Eve tastes the fruit and gives some to Adam. Both of them are immediately filled with guilt and shame. Because of their disobedience, God banishes them from the garden and tells Satan that one day Eve's descendants will destroy him. God was referring to Jesus.
10 generations passed, and humankind became more evil. God was sorry he made mankind and made plans to destroy humankind completely. However, God chose one faithful man, Noah, to continue the human race.
He instructed Noah to build an ark or boat large enough to hold Noah's family and pairs of every kind of living animal.
Noah did so. His family and the animals entered the ark, and the rain fell to destroy the earth. When the flood ended, God vowed never to destroy the earth again, and he sent a rainbow to be his symbol of his love and mercy for all of humankind.
God never gave up hope. He made a special promise with a man named Abraham. God said, "Look around as far as you can see. The promised land is for you and your family. Look up and count the stars. That is how many will be in your family. They will be a blessing to the entire world." But Sarah, Abraham's wife, laughed in disbelief at this promise.
How can this come true? We've never been able to have children, and now we're too old. But they weren't too old for a miracle. As promised, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter. Just as God had promised, the number of Abraham's descendants grew and grew and grew. Many generations later, God's ultimate blessing would come through Jesus.
God tested Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his special son, Isaac. Abraham was ready to obey, but God stepped in to provide a lamb. This was pointing to the sacrifice that God would make through his own special son, Jesus, the Lamb of God.
Years later, Sarah and Abraham died. Isaac married and had 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau was Isaac's favorite, and as the oldest, he was supposed to gain his father's inheritance. However, Jacob tricked Isaac into giving Jacob Esau's blessing by pretending to be his hairy brother. So Jacob got his father's special blessing, and God's promise to bless the family carried on through him. Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph was his favorite son and received a special coat from his father. His brothers resented him. They put him in a pit and then sold him to be a slave in a faraway place. God was with Joseph.
And many years later, he became the key leader in Egypt who saved thousands of people from famine. And incredibly, Joseph was also reunited with his family.
Joseph's family, who were called the Israelites, remained in Egypt. Their numbers grew and grew and grew. Many years later, Egypt's king, Pharaoh, felt threatened by the Israelites and forced them into slavery. In their suffering, the Israelites cried out to God.
God raised up Moses, a humble leader, to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Pharaoh was very stubborn and refused to let the Israelites go. So God sent incredible signs and wonders. Still, Pharaoh refused.
In the end, God sent the angel of death to kill the firstborn of all the Egyptian families and livestock. The blood of a lamb was placed over the doorframes of the Israelites' homes, and the angel of death passed over their homes without harming their firstborn. This was a sign pointing to Jesus' death as the Passover lamb who would save us from death.
Pharaoh finally agreed to let the people go. God parted the Red Sea, giving the people a narrow escape from Pharaoh's army. The Israelites danced and sang in celebration. Their journey to their promised land had just begun.
God guided the Israelites with a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of cloud in the day. God gave the Israelites laws and commands to help them follow his ways. But while Moses was up on Mount Sinai receiving these laws, the Israelites rebelled and built a golden calf. When Moses came down from the mountain, he was mad, and so was God. Moses broke the tablets of stone.
Later, God wrote the 10 Commandments with his own fingers on a new set of stone tablets. He also gave Moses a description of the tabernacle, which was a tent that God's presence would dwell in until they entered the promised land.
The Israelites kept complaining on their journey. They would not believe in the promises of God and wanted to go back to slavery in Egypt. When they came to look over the land that God had promised them, they became afraid, and only Joshua and Caleb had the courage to move with the promises of God. This lack of faith caused the Israelites to wander in the wilderness for 40 years.
After 40 years of wandering in the desert, the Israelites returned to their promised land, with Joshua now leading the people. He sent 2 spies into Jericho, the city they were about to invade. While they were there, the 2 spies hid in a house of a prostitute called Rahab. That day, the king of Jericho heard about the spies, but Rahab hid the 2 spies on her rooftop and told the king that the spies had already left. Then, when it was safe, she lowered them in a basket to the ground and they escaped.
Days later, Joshua led his army to the city of Jericho. They marched around the city for 7 days. On the 7th day, they marched around the city 7 times, blew their trumpets, and let out a loud shout. The walls of the city came tumbling down, and they marched straight in and conquered the city. They killed everyone except for Rahab and her family.
For years, Joshua and the Israelites marched through the promised land, defeating their enemies and dedicating their victories to God. The eventually the Israelites took control of much of the promised land. Finally, when he was very old, Joshua gathered all the leaders of Israel and reminded them of all the things that God had done for them. He placed a large stone under an oak tree as a reminder to all to follow the laws of God.
Soon after Joshua died, the people of Israel forgot to obey God. They continued to conquer Canaan, but failed to completely drive out the Canaanites as God had commanded. They began to worship the gods of the Canaanites, idols made of wood and stone. The stories of Judges follow a pattern. 1. Israel turns from God, does wicked things like stealing and killing, and serves idols. 2. God turns Israel over to the oppressive surrounding nations. 3. Israel turns to God and cries out for help. 4. God raises up judges to deliver them. 5. Israel rebels. God disciplines. Israel repents. God delivers. Israel rebels again and again. So, for 300 years, the people of Israel bounced back and forth from being faithful to God and doing their own thing. In each cycle, Israel seems to sink lower than she had previously sunk before. It was during this period that God raised up Gideon, who conquered thousands of Midianites with only 300 men, using just trumpets, jars, and torches. Also Samson, known for his superhuman strength, as long as he did not cut his hair. Although he really messed up, he eventually brought down the Philistine temple with his bare hands, killing many people who were gathered there.
There was a man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi who lived in Israel during the time of Judges. There was a great shortage of food that caused them to travel to a foreign country. Elimelech and Naomi had 2 sons, and when their sons grew up, they each married local Moabite women. Sadly, Naomi's husband and 2 sons died, and Naomi was left alone with her 2 daughters-in-law. She told them that she was going to move back to Israel, and that they should return to their own people. But one of the women, called Ruth, persuaded Naomi to take her with her. She said, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God."
So Naomi and Ruth moved back to Israel to begin a new life. One day, Ruth went into a field to pick up the grain that the farmers left behind. Little did she know that the owner of the field was Boaz, a relative of Naomi's. Boaz was kind to her and invited her to come and find food whenever she wanted. Naomi was getting older, so she came up with a plan to provide for Ruth once she was gone. She suggested that Ruth should sneak into Boaz's bedroom whilst he was sleeping, uncover his feet, and ask him to take care of her. Ruth took Naomi's advice and uncovered Boaz's feet and lay down next to him. In the middle of the night, Boaz woke up, startled. Ruth asked him to care for her and protect her. Boaz agreed, but said he needed to first buy the land she lived on, so that he would have the right to marry her. The leaders gave Boaz permission, and prayed that God would help Ruth to be a great wife. They were married, and had a son named Obed, who would soon become the grandfather of David, one of the greatest leaders Israel had ever known.
During the time when God sent judges to help Israel, there was a woman named Hannah who really wanted to have a son. She promised that if she did have a son, she would offer him the service to God. Soon after, Hannah did become pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel. When he was a young boy, she brought him back to the temple to live and serve the Lord.
One night, when Samuel was a little older, God spoke to him, telling him about the things that would happen to Israel in the future. This was the beginning of a special relationship between God and Samuel. God would use Samuel to speak to the Israelites over and over as a prophet, but the Israelites weren't satisfied with the prophet. They wanted a king, a military ruler, like the other nations around them had.
Despite Samuel's warning against it, they demanded that God gave them a king. God gave them a king, a man called Saul, whom the Israelites would trust to lead them. Samuel appointed Saul, and the Israelites shouted, "Long live the king!" In the beginning, Saul was a good king and built a strong army and fought the Philistines. But soon, Saul became very proud and broke many religious laws. Saul's actions had terrible consequences. Samuel told Saul, "Since you have rejected God, God has rejected you as king."
It was time to look for another king. So God told the prophet Samuel to pick one of Jesse's 7 sons to be king. They were all mostly tall, strong and handsome. Samuel thought one of them would be king, but God said no. Instead, God chose Jesse's youngest son, a shepherd boy who was also a very good harp player.
Sometime later, King Saul led the Israelites in battle against the Philistines. The Philistines had a war hero named Goliath, who was a giant compared to the other men. For many days, Goliath would make fun of Israel and God and challenge someone from Israel to fight him. But every soldier in Israel was too afraid to stand up to Goliath. One day, David's father told him to go take some food to his brothers who were fighting for Israel in the battle against the Philistines. David heard Goliath's insults and volunteered to face Goliath. As a shepherd protecting his sheep, David had gained experience killing a bear and a lion. He was sure God was going to help him defeat Goliath. David went to Goliath, spoke up for God, and killed Goliath with a sling and rock. Then the Israelite army rose up with courage and defeated the Philistines. David grew in popularity among Israel.
In the following years, King Saul began to be jealous of David and wanted to kill him. David and his friends fled to the mountains and hid in the caves. He wrote many songs or psalms that expressed his sorrow to God as well as his trust and worship of God. David eventually became king and was called a man after God's heart. Many years later, Jesus, the King of Kings, would be called the Son of David, the greatest descendant of David's royal lineage.
Right before King David died, he told his son Solomon to be strong, follow God's ways, and no matter what, not to worship other gods. God appeared to Solomon shortly after he became king. Ask whatever you want me to give you. Worried about following in his father's footsteps, Solomon asked God to give him wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong. God not only promised to give Solomon wisdom, but great riches and honour as well.
Solomon's wisdom was tested when 2 prostitutes came to him fighting over a baby. Solomon knew one of them had to be wrong. So he asked his servants to bring him out a sword, and suggested to the women that he cut the baby in two and gave each of them a half. One of the women was so worried that the baby would be killed, she immediately asked Solomon to give the child to the other woman. Solomon saw her love and affection and knew that it had to be her baby, so he gave the child to her.
The Israelites were in awe of Solomon's great wisdom. He ruled for many years, growing in wealth and fame. He also wrote down many wise sayings called Proverbs. During his reign, Solomon decided to finish the temple his father David had planned to build. He built a temple that wasn't very big, but was unbelievably beautiful and detailed.
God appeared to Solomon again and promised to bless him, as long as he would keep following God. Solomon did follow God, but made some major mistakes, like taking on foreign wives and worshipping their gods. Because of this, God told Solomon the kingdom of Israel would be taken from him and he would not enjoy the peaceful and successful reign his father had known.
After the reign of Solomon, King Rehoboam, he was a bad king and did not look after the people of Israel. His bad decisions meant that Israel became very poor. The 10 tribes in the north wanted freedom and to split away. Judah in the south was ruled by Rehoboam, and Israel in the north was ruled by Jeroboam. The people of Judah and Israel began to worship idols like Baal and started doing things that upset God. As their relationship with God became broken, so did their relationship with each other.
God sent lots of messengers to remind his people that they had made a covenant with him, but the people ignored them. Elijah was one of these prophets during the reign of King Ahab, a very bad king. God brought a 3-year-long drought on the land, but kept Elijah safe by sending ravens to bring food to him. God told Elijah to speak to Ahab and tell him to return to God. Ahab refused, so Elijah challenged him to a test. They made 2 sacrificial altars and prayed to God and Baal to set them alight. Nothing happened to Baal's sacrifice, but God sent down a fire to Elijah's sacrifice. Yet still, the people wanted to go their own way. Elijah despaired and wanted to run away. But God asked him to appoint a better king and a prophet to lead the people, Elisha.
Jonah was a man who loved God, but then one day God said to Jonah, "Go to Nineveh and tell them they have made me angry." The people in Nineveh weren't very friendly.
They liked to peel the skin off people they didn't like.
And so Jonah got scared. He decided to go the other way and run away to Tarshish on the opposite side of the sea.
Whilst Jonah was at sea, there was a fierce storm. The sailors were scared, but they knew that God had sent the storms. They drew lots to work out who had upset God. The lots fell on Jonah, and the sailors threw Jonah overboard. God sent a big fish to swallow Jonah up. He stayed there for 3 days amongst the fish guts and seaweed, and during this time Jonah had a change of heart.
God gave Jonah a second chance. He went to Nineveh and an amazing thing happened. The people repented and God forgave them and didn't need to destroy them. This made Jonah mad, but God reminded him that he had a second chance.
After a while, things really fell apart for Israel. Despite God's constant reminders to turn back to him, the Israelites ignored his prophets time and time again. God let the Babylonian army invade Israel, and many of his people were taken into captivity, including Daniel.
King Nebuchadnezzar wanted Daniel to live like him, but Daniel chose to live God's way. This meant that he got God's gift of wisdom and understanding dreams. This impressed the king, who gave Daniel a top job. Daniel never forgot that his gift was from God, but this made many people jealous. The king made a statue that everyone had to bow to, but Daniel's friends wouldn't bow to anyone but God. The king had them thrown into a furnace, which was so hot, even the men who threw them in got burnt up. But God was in the furnace with them and protected them.
The king was so amazed he worshipped God. Another king made it illegal to worship God, but Daniel refused to obey and was thrown into a pit of lions. Again God protected him, so Daniel didn't get eaten, and again the king saw God's glory and worshipped God. Daniel didn't stop loving God, and everyone could see God's glory through him.
Though scattered, God was still watching over the Jewish people, and God gave them hope. Speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, God said, "I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel, returning them to the promised land, and filling their hearts and minds with my ways."
60 years later, this hope was realized. The Persian Empire freed the Jewish people to return to their promised land. A small number gathered back in the capital city of Jerusalem, and a new smaller temple was built under the leadership of Ezra. Reunited, they celebrated and shouted with joy. But the elders wept as they remembered how things used to be. Prophets like Malachi and Isaiah pointed to the future and the coming king, a Messiah, one who would fully restore Israel and bring a new kingdom of peace.
So the Jewish people waited and hoped, and God would not speak through the prophets again for 400 years.